At the turn of the 20th century, Argentina was the world's seventh wealthiest nation. With a rapidly growing population and economy, it seemed that Argentina was poised to become the superpower of South America. But this isn't the reality of modern Argentina. After a century of instability and mismanagement, Argentina's economy now ranks just below the world's average in terms of GDP per capita. Is this trend irreversible? Or does Argentina have the potential to reclaim its former status? This and more will be discussed in this report on Argentina's geopolitics. I will analyze Argentina's geopolitics by assigning it a score from F to S in 8 categories. At the end of this episode, I will take the average of these scores to rank Argentina's geopolitical status. Let's start with the first category, Geographic Security. Argentina's geography is one of its many inherent strengths. To the west, Argentina is shielded by the Andes mountain range, with peaks as high as 6,900 meters. An invasion from that direction is not even a geopolitical consideration for Argentina. The Andes mountain range continues down the west coast until it reaches Cape Horn, Argentina's southernmost point. With nothing but desolate Antarctic Sea beyond that point, Argentina does not need to concern itself with defending this border either. In contrast, Argentina's east coast is its first potential geographic weakness. While the Falkland War was mostly a tool used by Leopoldo Galtieri to stir up nationalism during an economic slump, capturing the islands was also an important geopolitical objective for Argentina. Without the islands, Argentina's soft underbelly, its eastern coast, is at a much higher risk in the event of an invasion. This is the main weakness of Argentina's geography, but it is currently not too significant of a threat as the current owner of the islands, the United Kingdom, has minimal geopolitical investment in the region. Further north is Argentina's border with Uruguay, formed entirely by the Uruguay River. The first bridge that crosses it is over 250 kilometers from Buenos Aires, meaning that any army invading from there would take a few days before it could reach the capital. While it is unlikely that conflict between Uruguay and Argentina would occur outside of the soccer arena, geopolitics is about capabilities, not direct engagement, so having this buffer is important for Argentina's geographic security. As for the rest of Argentina's northern border, the Pampas Plains forms the buffer zone between Argentina's major population centers and the nations of Brazil, Paraguay, and Bolivia. With all that considered, Argentina scores an A for its geographic security. The same can't be said for Argentina's government stability. While many South American nations are known for their political instability, Argentina is perhaps the most dramatic. In the early 1900s, Argentina was essentially the USA of South America. It was the seventh wealthiest economy in the world, had the second highest European immigration rate after the USA, and had one of the fastest growing economies. Literacy rates were increasing, and universal male suffrage became law in 1912. However, the end of this prosperity began in 1930 with Argentina's first military coup, the first of many to come. Another coup happened in 1945, with the infamous dictator Juan Perón coming to power. Backed by a coalition formed by Argentina's working class, he instituted many populist economic policies and nationalized a few industries. This resulted in Argentina's economic decline during the 1950s. Although Perón was ultimately overthrown by a military coup in 1955, this wouldn't be the end of his influence on Argentina. The leaders of the 1955 coup were overthrown by another military coup in 1962, which was then overthrown by another coup in 1966. It wasn't until 1973 when general elections were held for the first time in 10 years. This is when Perón made his return to Argentine politics. Although he was forced into exile after he was overthrown, he remained the head of a popular political movement known as the Peronists. Perón was prevented from running the 1973 election, but the Peronist faction got their candidate elected. The Peronist candidate stepped down and allowed Perón to take his place. Perón died in 1974, his wife taking over power in his place. She was overthrown in yet another military coup in 1976. The military junta that took over in 1976 was perhaps the worst yet. They began the Dirty War, a period of time where government death squads killed political dissidents. By the end of it, an estimated 30,000 people were missing. The junta slowly began to lose legitimacy as Argentina's economy declined. The dictator at the time, Galtieri, started the Falklands War in an attempt to rally support behind the government. After Argentina lost the war, the junta government went away soon after. Elections returned to Argentina in 1983 and have been free and fair since. Despite all of this history, Argentina still manages to score a C for government stability. For the last 4 decades, the Argentinian government has been relatively stable, but its long history of government instability prevents it from scoring any higher. Looking at Argentina's economic stability, we see a similar story. Argentina's economy went from one of the world's most prosperous to one of the world's most troubled. Of course, Argentina's economy did not fare well during its century-long period of instability, but since then things have not improved much. Argentina's economy was partly nationalized for most of the 20th century, leading to a stagnant economy. In 1999, the country saw the return of free market policies, marking the beginning of Argentina's modern economic history. In this year, the IMF sponsored a program for Argentina to get its debt under control, requiring Argentina to reduce its budget deficit and liberalize its economy to be more attractive to foreign investors. Argentina struggled to meet these requirements, and by 2001, there was still no improvement. In response, the IMF gave Argentina an ultimatum: dollarize the economy or devalue your currency. Investors, both foreign and domestic, panicked over the possibility that Argentina would devalue its currency, resulting in capital flight and mass withdrawals. However, this instability proved to be temporary, as in 2002 the Argentine economy began a long period of rapid economic growth, averaging 7% annually from 2002 to 2011, when growth began to slow. Growth stagnated until 2018, when Argentina saw the return of economic instability. Runaway inflation got as high as 50%. In 2020, the Argentinian government had no choice but to default on its debt. There is no denying that Argentina's economy is incredibly unstable in its current state. However, Argentina's economy has the potential to become much more prosperous. After all, it was one of the wealthiest nations in the early 1900s. To start, Argentina has a highly educated workforce and a mostly service-based economy, with services accounting for 60% of its GDP. It also has many natural resources. Argentina possesses both liquid and shale oil, fertile land, and abundant metals. It also industrialized very early in its history, so it has the economic infrastructure needed to supply a developed economy. Considering all of these factors, Argentina has the potential for an economic resurgence, but as it stands now, its economic stability is only C tier. Argentina's stable demographics set the nation apart from other Latin American states. Over the past decade, Argentina has averaged a population growth rate of 1% annually. Argentina has a total fertility rate of 2.28 births per woman, combined with a low mortality rate. The demographic structure of Argentina is very bottom-heavy, with persons aged 0 to 24 making up 40% of the population. All of this data places Argentina in Phase 3 of its demographic transition model, a quality that is very rare for a high-income country. As for Argentina's migration profile, it is one of only 2 countries in South America with a positive migration rate, albeit a very unimpressive 0.1 net migrants per 1,000. Most immigrants to Argentina originate from Paraguay and Bolivia, countries with a lower standard of living than Argentina. This provides Argentina with a balanced workforce as it moves towards a service-based economy, as immigrants from those 2 countries fill low-skilled positions. Overall, Argentina's demographics complement its economy very well. This earns the country an A-tier ranking for demographics. Argentina also scores well for social stability. Aside from the persecution of Native Americans in Argentina's early history, there has been no major history of ethnic or religious conflict. Unlike many of the other former Spanish colonies, the encomienda system did not have a major impact on Argentina's social fabric. Most of its society was formed after it gained independence, when it enjoyed the second highest immigration rate in the world until 1950. However, Argentina's century of political instability had a profound impact on the nation's social unity. While there are no longer any skirmishes between the nation's political far left and far right, this tension remains an undertone. As such, Argentina scores a B for social stability. Argentina's agriculture is another one of the country's inherent strengths. With a food export to import ratio of 17:1, food security is the least of Argentina's geopolitical concerns. Argentina is the world's third largest producer of soy, fourth largest producer of corn, and 11th largest producer of wheat. Argentina has the 8th most arable land in the world, and its land advantage will only increase as climate change increases its range of agriculturally viable land into Patagonia. Agriculture makes up close to 10% of Argentina's GDP. It's safe to say that Argentina scores an S for food independence. In terms of energy independence, Argentina is also very self-sufficient. Argentina produces 12 billion more kilowatt hours than it consumes, making it electricity independent. As for its petroleum, Argentina is a net exporter of crude. However, it imports more refined petroleum than it consumes. Argentina is also poised to take advantage of the shale revolution, possessing the world's 6th largest proven reserves of shale oil. Altogether, Argentina's energy independence is another one of the nation's strengths. Argentina scores an A for this category. For the last category, military power, Argentina scores a B. As a percentage of GDP, Argentina spends a very modest 0.9% on defense. However, due to its large economy, this is still enough for Argentina to rank as the 46th highest spender for its military in the world. Argentina's Navy and Air Force are sizable enough for its security needs. The country ranks 10th for the most destroyers, 23rd for frigates, 30th for corvettes, 28th for submarines, and 33rd for aircraft. While Argentina's military capabilities are insufficient to defend itself in an unexpected attack, Argentina's large industrial base and significant young population would allow it to quickly rebuild its military in such an event. All things considered, Argentina has a B-tier military. To summarize, Argentina received these scores for each category. On the whole, this averages out to a B+. However, I've decided to put Argentina in A tier. While Argentina's government stability and economic stability are serious liabilities for its geopolitical strength, these factors have been improving in the nation recently. Furthermore, these factors are able to change, while other factors, most importantly food and energy independence, are very difficult to improve. As such, I feel that Argentina's strong ranking in those categories are more than enough to pull the nation up to A tier. That concludes my report on Argentina's geopolitics. The next South American nation I will cover in this series is Brazil, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss that episode. Thanks for watching.